All right, today we're going to take a deep dive, a real look inside a super interesting personality profile, the Intuitive Introvert. We're going to explore what really makes them tick, from that rich inner world they live in to how they actually navigate the one out here.
So let me just start with a question for you. Does that internal world of yours, the landscape of thoughts and ideas and possibilities, does it ever feel more real or maybe just more engaging than the world right in front of you? If you're nodding along, you're definitely in the right place.
Okay, first up, let's talk about that world of ideas. We're going to start by exploring that rich internal landscape that's so characteristic of this personality profile. At its heart, this is really all about seeing the world through a totally different lens. It's not so much about what is, it's much more about what could be. You're looking at a world that's built on patterns, on future possibilities, and this constant search for a deeper meaning behind everything. Now, to really get this, we've got to break it down to its two fundamental building blocks. I like to call them the core codes, and they come from the Myers-Briggs framework. So the whole foundation for this conversation is something you've probably heard of, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. And look, it's really important to remember this isn't some rigid scientific diagnosis, it's just a framework, a way to understand our preferences. And for what we're talking about today, we're zeroing in on two key preferences that really create the profile we're exploring.
The first code is introversion, the I. And this is so not about being shy, okay? It's all about where you get your energy from. Introverts recharge with solitude by spending time alone. Their focus is on their inner world of thoughts and ideas. And as you can see, they tend to think to talk, not talk to figure out what they think. It's a huge difference.
And the second code? That's intuition, which is represented by an N. This is all about how you prefer to process information. And the contrast here is everything. See, while sensing types are focused on the concrete reality, what's right in front of them, intuitive types are just naturally pulled towards the abstract. They're always looking for patterns, they trust their insights, and they live in this world of exploring future possibilities.
So, what happens when we put these two traits together? When you combine that inward focus of introversion with the pattern-seeking mind of intuition, well, you get four distinct personality types. We often call them the intuitive introverts. Let's meet them.
First up, we've got the INFJ, often called the advocate. And here's a fun fact. They're actually considered the rarest of all 16 personality types. And that's probably because their mix of traits is just so unique.
So what's an INFJ all about? Well, they're driven by this really deep sense of idealism and a powerful set of personal values. But they aren't just dreamers, not at all. They're visionaries. They can see a better future and feel this huge responsibility to help create it. Their empathy is off the charts. They get people on a super deep level. And what's wild is that they're also surprisingly organized when it's time to turn that big vision into a reality. Next on our list is the INTJ, or the architect. Now, if the INFJ is driven by values, the INTJ is all about logic. These guys are the strategic masterminds of the personality world.
INTJs had these incredibly original minds and just a relentless drive to hit their goals. They see complex systems and patterns absolutely everywhere, which lets them cook up these amazing long-range strategic plans. They're fiercely independent, totally logical, and they set incredibly high standards for themselves and, let's be honest, for pretty much everyone else too, all in the service of turning their ideas into reality.
So we've got the value-driven advocate and the logical architect. That's 2 down, 2 to go. Let's see how the next two types express that same core, that same inner focus of introversion and intuition, but in totally different ways.
And now let's talk about the INFP, who you might know as the mediator. Just like the INFJ, they're idealists, guided by these really strong inner values. But they express it with a more gentle and creative kind of curiosity.
See, INFPs want to live a life that's in perfect harmony with their deepest values. They're incredibly imaginative, empathetic, always exploring possibilities. They're always trying to understand people so they can help them reach their potential. And while they're usually super flexible and accepting, that can change in a heartbeat the second one of their core values is threatened.
And that brings us to our final intuitive introvert, the INTP, the logician. For them, the world isn't really a place of people or values. It's more like a complex machine that's just begging to be taken apart and understood.
NTPs are driven by this profound thirst for knowledge and for logical consistency. They're theoretical, they're abstract, they're way more interested in deconstructing some complex idea than in, small talk.
They approach literally everything with a skeptical, analytical, and relentlessly logical mind. And they're capable of incredible focus when they find a problem that's really captured their curiosity.
Okay, so we've met the 4 types: the advocate, the architect, the mediator, and the logician. Now, let's take these ideas and see how they actually play out in a really practical setting, the modern workplace.
A huge question for so many organizations these days is all about where people do their best work. And, as it turns out, personality, and especially having an intuitive preference, plays a massive role in that.
Yeah, research shows a really clear trend here. People with an intuition preference who have to work full-time in an office, well, they're generally less satisfied and way more likely to be looking for a new job. They need that autonomy and flexibility to do their deep, abstract thinking. And it turns out hybrid workers with this trait tend to spend less time in the office and naturally find their way to companies that don't have those rigid attendance rules.
So here's the bottom line, the really crucial point. Forcing a return to the office isn't just about someone's preference. For a company, it could literally mean losing their most forward-thinking, big-picture employees who will just up and leave to find a more flexible place to work.
And this need for a different kind of environment, it really gets to the heart of what it means to be an intuitive introvert. To wrap this all up, let's go back to the source of these ideas, the psychologist Carl Jung, to explore the really unique nature of this worldview.
And this quote, wow, it just brilliantly sums up the 2 sides of the introverted intuitive. Jung himself described this type as a paradox. On one hand, they can be the mystical seer who sees things no one else does. On the other, they can be the eccentric artist completely lost in their own world. It's such a fine line between being a visionary and being an enigma.
Which leaves us with one last question to think about. Is this rich internal world of patterns and possibilities, is it just a fantasy? Or is it simply a different and maybe even essential way of seeing reality?